We'll get started. But you're just after 10:30. Welcome. We have Supervisor Capps and Supervisor Hartman here, so we have our committee members and we can begin. We will begin with public comment for any items that are not on the agenda. So I think we have some folks for the polluters pay climate. Anybody have comments on items not on the agenda? Or Kathy, anybody online?
No one has their hand raised.
Right. In that case, we'll move to number 2, which is approval of the minutes from the July 14th meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
I moved.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. That will move to item number 3, which is our federal update. Don, would you like to get started?
Sure thing. Good morning, everyone. Here we are again in September, wondering if the federal government's going to be open next month. The new fiscal year will start October 1, and the clock is really ticking on them having to get something enacted into law to prevent a government shutdown. There's only 11 days where Congress will be in session this month. And so it's clear that they won't be able to do too much in the way of the annual appropriations bills. So they're going to have to default to a continuing resolution to provide more time to work on this. Even though that's a clear path that they need to go, the details are still very, very murky. The parties are pretty far apart, and that's because of the root problem that they disagree on what levels of non-defense spending there should be next year. President Trump proposed a 23% cut in those programs when he submitted his budget to Congress. And the House Appropriations Committee has been drafting bills that do cut many of these programs, certainly not as much as the president proposed, but still some significant cuts. Overall, their bills would cut about 6%. And when you layer that on top of the continuing resolution from last year, where we didn't see any increase, and that means inflation is going to be eroding spending for programs, that starts to add up to some significant impacts on the county's priorities. And some programs and some agencies would be cut much more than 6%. So it's definitely something that we've been opposing and concerned about. The Senate appropriators generally are not in drafting bills that have these cuts in them. And in some cases, the programs are going to get a little bit of a bump up. So this is a difference of opinion, a different approach, and the lack of an agreement on what this overall plan has made it really impossible to do the bills. It's slowed everything down. We haven't had any fiscal year 26 appropriations bills signed into law yet. And as we know, when Congress gets into this situation, they just look to a continuing resolution to buy them some more time. I do think that's the most likely scenario this month, that by October 1, we'll have some sort of interim funding that gets enacted. However, there's some pretty big obstacles that have to be overcome. And the shutdown phrase is being uttered by a number of people in Congress who we need to get their support to keep the government open. So it's something that could end up being a bit of a problem. Apart from the spending levels, the controversy between the administration and congressional Democrats is really creating a problem for the appropriations process. Throughout the year, the administration has taken a lot of executive authority steps that are pretty much unprecedented and are very aggressive, and been very hard for Democrats to swallow. They haven't had too many ways that they could fight back in Congress since they're in the minority. And now that we're having to enact a continuing resolution and then the 12 bills to fund the government, now they have a little bit more influence, and this is an opportunity perhaps for them to have some leverage with the White House and with congressional Republicans. They're really in a tough spot, though, because in order to pull this off, they're going to have to be willing to say, no, we're not going to support funding bills, and we don't care if the government shuts it down. And they tried that last year, and it didn't go anywhere. I think there's a lot of hurt feelings, and it would not surprise me if they went down that path this year. Because they just haven't had too many other ways to engage the White House on these areas where the Trump administration is overreaching. So not everybody's on the same page about it, and it's going to take a while for the White House, the House, and the Senate to figure out what they want to do. Right now, what the leadership is trying to do is package together a couple of the least controversial appropriations bills that they're not very far apart on, kind of package them together, 2 or 3 of those bills, and add a continuing resolution to that and bring it to the floor before the end of the month. If they take that approach, they still have to decide how long to take the continuing resolution, and that can be a significant fight in and of itself. Lots of different options on the table. I think it will end up being something that runs through the end of December. That's typically the minimum amount of time that Congress needs to pull these things together. But different blocks in the House and the Senate of members have different perspectives on that, and some of them want different lengths of time in order to keep pressure on in different ways. So it could be shorter into November. I think the Trump White House would rather it go through March, which I don't think would be good for the county. But in any case, we'll see by the end of this month if they're able to pull it out. Apart from these funding bills, we are starting to see some legislative initiatives that are happening that might give us a chance to make some progress on some of your priorities. Unfortunately, earlier in the year, the reconciliation process kind of derailed the normal legislative process. But with that out of the way, different bills are starting to make some progress. Just mention a few of them, and happy to go into more detail if desired. But there is a bipartisan housing bill that has come out of the Senate Banking Committee, which is S2651. The Road to Housing Act. That's got quite a few provisions in it that would be helpful to local government. The agriculture committees are hoping to restart their work on the Farm Bill reauthorization. We will certainly be advocating for more funding for the Disaster Relief Fund at FEMA and similar program at the Department of Transportation, the Emergency Relief Fund. That is going to be an issue that has to be dealt with. There's some deadlines on programs related to healthcare programs. 2 that are important for the county are the federally qualified health centers and reauthorization of the opioid programs that were originally set up in 2018. There's a number of other programs that are more or less of interest, but those are 2 that are probably going to be a focus of some of our advocacy here in the next month or 2. One of the more interesting legislative developments was the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee in the House passed the FEMA Reform Bill, H.R. 4669. Representative Carbajal was very involved in this and was very helpful in providing information to the county and asking for our feedback. This is a very important bill because it runs counter to the Trump administration's efforts to devolve FEMA to more or less a state responsibility. This legislation would elevate it to a cabinet level position and has quite a few reforms in it that would most of the time be good reforms and would streamline the process so that you could get money in a more reliable way and certainly hopefully a quicker way. We wouldn't see as many delays, I don't think. I did want to also note that in early August, Representative Carbajal introduced H.R. 4877, the Central Coast Heritage Protection Act. And this is a bill that he's carried in several Congresses. He's managed to get it through the House on 5 different occasions, and the Senate has not cooperated to help get it enacted into law. It's a wilderness and wild and scenic river bill that would designate additional places for conservation and preservation in the Central Coast. So we're going to be supporting that, of course.
Okay.
And it'll be a little bit tougher, but he's very resourceful to somehow get this through a Republican House. We'll hope to see good things happen on that. So I'll conclude there and see if I can address any concerns or questions you might have.
Don, if I may.
Yes.
So the Department of Transportation has 1.4 million that was awarded for across Santa Ynez Valley Connector. And it's still hanging in abeyance. We understand it was awarded to the tribe. The tribe got some indication that it will be actually awarded. Do you have any idea of the timing or the process or how we learn more about that?
I'll ask the Department of Transportation. I was under the impression that it had been approved. So I appreciate you bringing that up again. I've been paying attention to that, and I meant to bring it up in my comments. I'm sorry I forgot to do that. But yeah, I was under the impression that it had been approved by the Department of Transportation and was going to happen. But I certainly can reach out to the agency to try to find out what's happening.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, we got notification that it would be, but then it got all tangled up. The tribe got some indication that yes, it was coming, but we haven't heard anything else. And we're actually moving forward on the basis of other grants. And so if this is coming, it would be very helpful because how we do the work, if we have all this 1.4 million more, it'll make a big difference.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
Chair. Dawn, this is Kelly Hubbard.
Hello.
Hi. For HR 4669, I know it's bipartisan. Are we seeing anything in regards to how successful it might be or may not be? Because I, as you mentioned, it is in direct conflict with the current committee, FEMA committee to reevaluate FEMA.
You know, I was thinking about so many of the conversations I've had with you over the recent years, trying to get something through Congress in this area. It's just so hard. For whatever reason, the Senate takes a different approach than the House frequently. Things that we're able to get through the House, some quite often die over in the Senate. And this also has a bigger hill to climb because the administration, I can't believe, would support it. Now, they haven't actually taken a position on the bill, which is very interesting to me. So it's not dead yet, but it does have a ways to go. We have to get it through the House. And then, as you know, from so many heartbreaks in the past, the Senate can find a way to derail these things too. In the past, what has been the approach we've taken is to try to do more or less one issue bills that could reform a part of the process because these comprehensive approaches have been too hard to pull off. I'm really impressed with what the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee has been able to do and how bipartisan it is, especially in this current environment. So I have some optimism, but I think we know how hard this will be, and it will not happen soon.
Yeah, I think it has the greatest benefit for really roads. I mean, the county in total, but it could have a potentially very big impact for public works recovery because it has a lot of refinement for their aspect of response and recovery.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
This is Jesus. I have a question on 2651, the road to housing. When I was reading that summary, it seemed that to me that it could run into an impediment in light of the executive order discussion you have in your report just preceding your description of 2651.
Yes.
Can you offer?
You are 100% correct. I couldn't agree more. It's very, very much a sign of the times. Um, the Senate Banking Committee came together on this, and the way they released it to the public and quickly marked it up is part of the reason why they were successful in getting it out of the committee without it attracting any blowback.
Okay.
It does create a lot of questions about the executive order. I think it shows bipartisan concern about how some of these executive orders could be implemented. And it's just, it would be so helpful to see this housing bill passed by the full Senate and come over to the House, and we can see what we could do in the House. So far, I haven't seen anybody take it up in the House side, but it's widely. It was very interesting to follow the debate on this at the committee and to hear so many senators talking about a housing crisis. And it's pretty interesting to see that there's pretty a strong consensus that something has to be done. I think we saw some help in that in the reconciliation package when they included the low-income housing tax credit, that was sort of whatever else they were going to do to us, they actually gave us one important tool by including that. And so this is a different committee. That the low-income housing tax credit came out of the Senate Finance Committee. This is the Banking Committee, and the Banking Committee is saying, here's all of our ideas on what we can do to address this housing crisis. So it's hopeful. And a completely different issue. You know, if you saw anything about how the Secretary of Health and Human Services was received in his senatorial hearing the other day, a lot of these things there's bipartisan concern about, but it's hard to move legislatively when you have the White House leading basically what House and Senate Republicans are willing to do. So we'll take what we can get. It's a good step for sure.
The acronym is chaos.
Yeah.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Any public comment on this item? Hands up. Further discussion? Nope. We have a motion to receive and file the report.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes. Thank you, Don. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, then we'll move on to item 4, our state update from Hurst Brooks Espinoza. Looks like, Jean, are you ready to get started?
Yeah, thanks so much. We're glad to join you this morning, this last week of the legislative session for 2025. I think we'll all be relieved when the week is over. We wanted to sort of give you an update on where things are, given that there's been a lot of changes and newsworthy items that have occurred over the last couple of weeks. As you know, the legislature returned to Sacramento after a month-long recess here in mid-August, and really spent the entire first week focusing on a mid-cycle redistricting plan in opposition, to combat similar efforts in Texas and others to essentially block the president's request for a Texas redistricting that would allow for more congressional Republicans to be elected from that state. As you know, we will be, both California will be considering a ballot measure here in November that has a new mid-year redistricting plan that will be in effect for the 2026 elections and through the next decennial census. So that took up a lot of the air out of the room and energy from folks. And essentially the legislature lost about a week of action in getting bills ready to present to the governor by this week. We are now sort of post as appropriations committees where a number of bills were held, and a number of bills were amended to then move to the floor. Friday was the amendment deadline for bills to be amended on the floor. However, we're each aware of a number of measures that will require rule waivers to be amended today or tomorrow. All bills, regardless of their status, are subject to the 72-hour rule. So Tuesday is the last day in which bills can be amended and still considered on Friday. We'll be in some very late nights this week with hearings off the floor to consider measures that have recently been amended, including a number of budget trailer bills that we have yet to see language on, but know in fact are coming. We're happy to discuss sort of any measure of interest, but I know Kelly wanted to touch a little bit on the state's response to HR 1 and the implementation and implications of that measure. And so I'll go ahead and pass it over to her.
So I think we had anticipated that there would be a lot of interest in doing a special session this fall to talk about the changes needed in state law and to talk about funding options for the programs impacted by HR 1. However, I think in part because of the redistricting measure on the ballot and the Newsom administration has not, they have gotten a lot of information out around high level impacts. They haven't released more detailed information about the kinds of resources that they think they'll need to do things like update computer systems and address workforce issues. I do think we may see a trailer bill in the next 24 to 36 hours addressing some immediate changes in the CalFresh and food space, and possibly some funding for county administration. So we could see something there. But I think generally folks, because of the staggered implementation dates and several things not happening until October 2026, I think there's an interest in giving folks more time to kind of figure out impacts and to make estimates. So I think we will see more as soon as potentially in the January budget and certainly in the May revision next year. My sense is the administration is going to not be able to do a full presentation to the legislature in January because they won't have full guidance from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services on Medicaid work requirements. And that is likely going to take quite a bit of state resources, both on the eligibility side and on the computer system side. So I think this process is going to go on for quite some time. The statewide associations representing counties did a joint letter that I think went across the street last week, just outlining the impacts to health and human services and sort of putting the legislature on notice that we're likely going to need resources to implement. There's no dollar amounts included because I think we know counties are still working on impacts. So, and I don't think folks have solidified around like an ask or a strategy, but it, provides I think gives folks a preview of the things that, the reasons why counties are going to need resources. I think the big wild card in the health space is what the federal government decides to do about California's MCO tax, which would, if they decide to halt the existing MCO tax, which I think folks are worried about, they can do it retroactive to July 4th when HR 1 was signed. And so that would blow a fairly big hole in the budgets, the state budget. And that's potentially something the legislature would have to come back and figure out. But I think folks are still thinking it would be in the January timeframe, not over the fall. I have had some conversations with the chairs of the health committees and the budget subcommittees. I think they have the part of the reason they did informational hearings in mid-August when they came back from recess is because I think they wanted to highlight for folks the issues in HR1 and make sure that it's on the legislature's mind prior to them adjourning at the end of this week. I think that there will be an effort to either do informational hearings in the fall or to sort of convene stakeholders and have conversations about like what are the different components and what does this mean as they start to think about implementation. And I think there is not sort of consensus around like what the path is going forward. And I think folks are nervous about the state does not have enough resources to backfill all of the cuts that are coming. And so what are the options to try to maintain programs? So I think I think fall is the time to be working on like local impacts and start having conversations with your delegation because I think these issues are going to be sort of at the forefront when they return in January.
And Jean, do you have, we had talked a little bit about SB 635, which was the sidewalk vending bill. I know you had been working on that. Do you mind giving a quick update on that?
Sure. The bill was substantively amended coming out of the Assembly Appropriations Committee. Essentially clarifying some aspects of utilizing the information that a sidewalk vendor provides in order to get a license. So it clarifies that there is in fact a Public Records Act exemption for that information. Before there was a lack of clarity about when would be the appropriate time to share that information, creating a lot of confusion and a lot of potential liability associated with that language. So that is addressed. And then there's also some, they deleted the bar on contracting out services associated with enforcement and instead required any contractor who provides any services associated with enforcement to be subject to the same privacy considerations that the local agency would be. And then if they are found in violation of that, their contract is immediately terminated. There's some other language that was put into the bill on Friday that my understanding comes from some technical assistance from the administration. With that language, the code enforcement officers, the environmental health officers have removed their opposition and gone neutral on the bill. I know there's still some lingering concerns about some of the other aspects of environmental health reporting that folks are concerned about. I anticipate that this bill is going to get signed and we may have to do some cleanup next year on that one because the environmental health directors believe that they have an obligation to report to the public when there's a violation. So, you know, I would say a little bit of a mixed bag, but certainly a better place than where it had started.
Thanks, Jean. Any comments?
Kelly, can you talk about the trailer bill? When you mentioned potential changes to CalFresh, obviously making eligibility harder to save money?
No, I think there was some discussion about the cash assistance program for immigrants and whether it covers some of the groups that are going to lose coverage under CalFresh and whether
So expanding.
This is what I suspect they're having
Okay.
conversations about. I don't know what it's going to look like, where they land.
Okay. And also too, we're closely tracking the obviously that with the pipeline issues and the oil package, we're hearing that September 12th is when we could know for sure. Are you hearing anything in regards to Assemblymember Hart's bill and anything related to this oil package you can speak to?
Yeah, the Assemblymember Hart's bill was amended on Friday.
Yeah.
And I haven't had an opportunity to review those quite yet. We had heard that there was a potential to include both Assemblymember Hurt and Assemblymember Lamont's language in a trailer bill, but we haven't seen that language yet and won't know until it's released. But we will know by tomorrow if it's going to be included in that or if the individual bills will move forward. It's unclear to us, I think, at this point.
Okay. So can you go over the mechanics? Like, is that all one trailer bill or would be multiple?
Yeah,
Is it all
categorized by
subject?
subject area, yeah, so
Okay.
we'll be looking for that one in particular in the public resources trailer bill.
Okay.
We anticipate that and other things coming out today or tomorrow. The assembly, I believe, has a budget hearing, I think, set for tomorrow morning, so presumably the bills will be in print before then. I think it's at 8:30, so we should have an idea about what's included at that point.
Plus.
Sure. This, part of that public resources trailer bill, I've heard will have a component of possible CEQA exemptions for new onshore wells. Have you guys tracked that or heard that or?
I've not heard that, no.
Okay.
There are a number of CEQA provisions that have been discussed after the deal that was cut earlier this year, and I honestly, I couldn't keep track of them, there's so many. But we can keep you posted.
Seems like that's.
So, I'm personally, I'm supportive of Assemblyman Hart's bill. I know we had to officially watching it, but it sounds like could very well get folded into this trailer bill.
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
Although the bill was amended on Friday, so it makes you think that there's also a possibility that that bill moves, so it's, at this point, I just think we don't know, they're probably covered.
I mean, I'm interested in taking action in support of it. I don't know. It might not mean much at this stage, but I think it's helpful to be on record in support of what he's trying to do so valiantly up there on behalf of our town.
I agree. And Senator Lamone, although I think, yeah, I think it's a little tricky given the timing.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure if it's squarely within our platform.
Yeah, I think we've gone over it some more, so because of the litigation that was kind of shifting over time earlier this year, we had discussed it and thought it was probably better to watch, but some of that is kind of working its way out. We do think it fits with the platform, so if you want to support it.
Absolutely.
Great. So then I'll make the motion to support AB 1448, which is I keep saying supervisor, former supervisor Greg Hart, now Assemblyman Greg Hart's bill.
And I would second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It passes. So committee will support and HB will help us with letter and other action that we can do this week on AB 1448.
Will do, thanks. Claire, Josh is here, did you want us to update on the ICE masking measures?
Okay. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, Josh.
Perfect. Just a quick update on the two measures that the county not too long ago took a support position on, SB 627 by Senator Wiener and SB 805 by Senator Perez. Those both bills were amended last Friday and took I would say significant amendments given some of the pushback that they've received. So both bills were revised when it comes to the list of exemptions that are within the bill on so 805 is relative to displaying identification, and 627 is relative to wearing masks when doing law enforcement activities. So both revise the list of those that are exempt, and what type of masks are exempt, I guess I could say too. And they both remove the urgency clause, so they would not be subject to a 2/3 vote anymore, and would go into effect January 1st, 2026. Also, and maybe most significantly, when it comes to who it applies to, both bills were amended to exempt state law enforcement from the measures. So the bills would only now apply to local law enforcement and federal enforcement within the state. So those were, fairly significant amendments that the bills had undergone as recently as Friday, and now kind of are part of this final push this last week to the finish line.
What was the source of opposition? Law enforcement, yeah.
Yeah,
But
law
at the
enforcement.
state level.
Sorry, I missed the last piece. Law enforcement
DHP.
has been a source of opposition and expressed concerns with the measures and the impacts on kind of the way they do business. I think that opposition was not necessarily well received, especially by Senator Wiener. Was pretty direct in one of his early policy bill hearings on it, and his position was, while he appreciates their point or their feedback that they do not currently wear masks and therefore shouldn't be kind of included in the bill, that he felt the same way about ICE, and that ICE was not wearing masks until ICE was wearing masks, and he would like to keep it that way, and that's why he wanted his bill to apply broadly. But I think in terms of amending it to remove state law enforcement, that certainly
17.
that certainly removes potential state level concerns from the governor. I don't know that the governor had actually expressed those concerns, but certainly the author, by removing the impact on this state funded entity, has taken that potential concern off the table.
Seems like a contradiction, but okay.
Any comments? Committee?
Not on that, but I have a question. Your table in our,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, but I'll follow you.
Your table included a number of bills that indicated awaiting action on the Senate floor. If no action is taken by September 12th, does that mean the legislation dies or becomes a 2-year?
That means the legislation is dead for the year. They can come back in a different form, but they won't. Unless they're moving them to an active, they won't.
I did have a question about AB 1139, the CEQA exemption for public access and recreation. I thought that was passed as part of AB 130 or SB 131, that package. That was included in one of those, that CEQA exemption. And I just wanted to clarify if that was correct.
Chris, I don't know if you know more about this than I do. My guess is that Assemblymember Rogers wanted credit for moving his bill forward.
Yeah, and I will say the supervisor, or is that the planning director, is correct that there was an exemption for several similar purposes in AB 130. I think there might be this might be slightly broader, but we could do a side by side.
Okay, that's helpful. I just wanted to make sure I didn't misinterpret that. And then
The governor at this point, so.
Pardon?
That bill is on its way to the governor.
Okay. And then there was in some cases you list things are being held in the Senate Appropriations Committee. And some of the bills say not moving forward in 2025, and then others don't say that. Like for instance, AB 1206, single family and multifamily housing, for those pre-approved plans. What is that status?
So, it's a little challenging, but when a bill is held in the Assembly Appropriations suspense file,
Yeah,
the committee can move it out of committee, hold it in committee, or explicitly say that that bill is a 2-year bill that will be continued to be worked on in 2026. When those bills are held in committee and there's no like, they're dead for the year. There's
okay,
they're dead for the year.
okay,
I think the clarity is just it's a different mechanism by which bills move out of appropriations.
okay. So I shouldn't expect that this year.
Correct.
And then just the last one, if you know anything about AB 1308 and sort of how that might be moving forward, it's the residential building permits and inspections, allowing people to hire an outside private licensed inspector. It says it's on the Senate floor awaiting action. Do we think that's gonna go anywhere?
I also see that bill was amended on Friday.
Yeah, and part of the the reason for those amendments is to prevent chaptering out because there's provisions in the Housing Accountability Act in this bill and other bills. So yeah, I think this is one that's been getting bipartisan support. There have been some changes in policy committee process throughout, but I wouldn't be surprised to see this bill continue to move.
Okay, that's unfortunate. Thank you.
There are comments or questions on our state update? Kathy, anyone for public comment online? I have a motion to receive and file the state update. Luke,
Well, second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks HB and
Thank you.
Chris for the updates. Good luck with the last few days. All right, with that, we'll move to item 5, Polluters Pay Climate Superfund legislation. This relates to AB 1243 and SB 684. There is a memo in your packet if you're following along. So both of these bills are quite similar. They have failed for the 2025 session, but their supporters anticipate bringing it back in 2026, either as 2-year bills or they might get a new number and move forward as new legislation. So we're talking about them today. The committee has been interested in potentially supporting these and kind of having that support ready for next year. In the memo, I've identified some parts of the platform that kind of relate to the legislation. There is a lot in the platform about climate sustainability, but we're talking about it today because I think this legislation is pretty controversial. It goes pretty far, and so we would want to refer this to the full board if the committee wants to support the legislation. And just a little bit about the bills. So I would create this Climate Superfund program administered by California EPA. It would make these companies subject to action going back to 1990. So it's a retroactive, kind of a lengthy period. The agency would have to do a climate cost study to figure out how much these companies owe. They would then pay into the Superfund, and then the fund would be used to enact climate sustainability programs throughout the state. So as I said, we can consider this in the committee. We would want to refer it to the full board. And then that action could be considered. And if the board supports, then the county could support legislation that comes out in the 2026 session. So any discussion from the committee to start with?
I think it was interesting that we heard the discussion on the federal level about FEMA and the two different approaches. I think it's really important that the county do all it can to protect itself financially because climate-related disasters are really going to be a major impact on our finances over the long run. And if we can't get insurance figured out, people won't be able to sell their properties easily, and that's going to affect our property tax. So I think this measure is an effort to put a spotlight on that very significant fact. And I don't know whether it would be, if we bring it to the board, whether we'd want to bring it in the form of a resolution, so we've got it ready to go. Because I guess if we write a letter, I'm not sure where the letter goes. We're just kind of waiting for something to happen again. But I think as we look to the future with a federal government that is administration that wants to shift more costs to local, and we don't have a way to pay for that. We simply do not. It would bankrupt us as a county. So, so I'm supportive of this idea in concept, strongly supportive.
I'm also too, and I just want to thank the advocates for putting this on the radar, and I think you're here today as well, but to really be advocating locally and to, I think we're getting ahead of the game here. It's not even yet a bill formation, but to put this on my radar to get us poised to really be proactive in support. I agree with Supervisor Hartman that there needs to be a fund. There needs to be accountability. There needs to be a way in which oil companies that have been receiving federal subsidies for decades, that always goes unnoticed, unaccounted for, that they also have to pay their fair share of the disasters. When I received the materials on Friday for this meeting, we had just talked to Director Armis about an upcoming board agenda item about phase out of oil and gas, which is coming up on our board agenda item, not to talk about both, but I did wonder, just a question, with abandoned wells, if this would at all relate, because we do have potential as there's abandoning of wells, as oil becomes less lucrative here in the state of California and in our county, and there's potential leaks. I just wondered if this fund, that's a question I have, more on the substance, if this fund could somehow apply to anything related to unintended consequences of abandoned wells. So that's just a question.
Just a clarification, abandoned is actually capped and properly closed. Orphaned is the right term.
So anyway, I'm just connecting in my mind because I got this at the same time as we were talking about this, but that's just a question, a substantive question I have that doesn't need to be answered, because I see that as a upcoming issue. So, but yes, I'm in support.
Then I think we have members of the public with us who'd like to comment. Maybe we'll just go in order. Kathy, you can let us know who's signed up. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, we'll kick us off. Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren Leland. I'm a District 1 resident and an organizer with the Polluters Pay Santa Barbara Coalition. So here this morning to ask the Legislative Committee to support a county resolution in support of AB 1243 and SB 684, the Polluters Pay Climate Superfund Act. Simple reality is that we cannot afford the cost of climate disasters as is, let alone into the future as these disasters become both more frequent and more intense. California faced a $12 billion deficit this year, and we're watching as FEMA funding and environmental protections are getting slashed. Here in Santa Barbara County, the extensive damages from the Thomas Fire and subsequent Montecito mudslides show just how quickly these costs can pile up and what we're up against in the future. We need more funding for disaster recovery and response, and ultimately we need more funding for climate resilience. Last year, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce found that every dollar invested in disaster preparation saves 13 in economic costs, damages, and cleanup. By charging those who are most responsible for the climate crisis, we can take the steps we need to make our communities more safe, more affordable, more resilient. And by joining cities and counties across the state in passing a resolution in support of the Polluters Pay Climate Superfund Act, Santa Barbara County can help to ensure that this bill ultimately gets passed in Sacramento. So thank you for your commitment to climate action.
Next is Mary Bird.
Hi, Mary Bird. I'm with 350 Santa Barbara. We support the Make Polluters Pay bill, and we really appreciate your attention to this issue. It's pretty critical. So as we've said, we have already seen climate disasters in the county, and we know that they require a lot to repair and rebuild from. And we know also that just a few fossil fuel companies have made enormous profits off of operating in our county and causing some of the conditions that have caused these climate events. So just as we held tobacco companies accountable for causing harm, we need to hold these companies accountable. And I think that the fairly obscure field of climate attribution science, there was a breakthrough study published in May in the journal Nature that basically paved the path to say, okay, this is the amount of greenhouse gases and this is the kind of disasters that we can tie these two things together. So as we've talked about, there's not going to be sufficient funds from the federal government for response. And there's also not going to be much to support the transition to a greener economy. And so these are the two areas that I think we have to remember to focus on, that we are not just repairing, rebuilding, preparing for the next climate disaster, but we also need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and pave the way to a greener technologies, greener jobs. So I would ask that you adopt this recommendation to support this bill in the session. And I think even though it's now scheduled for the 2026 session, it is a matter of some urgency to build support around the state, because this is going to be a controversial bill and it's going to have a lot of opposition from oil and gas industry. And so I think it's important to show that all around the state, counties and cities are adopting resolutions, are supporting it. So I just thank you for considering this, and we are very happy that you're looking at it. Thank you.
Next is Carol Miller.
Yeah, hi. My name is Carol Millar. I'm also with 350 Santa Barbara and the Fearless Grandmothers. I just want to say that, as was mentioned, it's based on the Superfund Act. And that has been upheld in court. So it's not as revolutionary as it seems. And I just did a quick search this morning, like, what has Superfund cleaned up? And, you know, we think about Superfund like a national thing, but of course it's operating in local jurisdictions. So, you know, in Jackson, Florida, it cleaned up 1,500 residential, public, and commercial properties, removing incinerator ash. So anyway, so these things have obviously a big effect on local communities. I also, just to piggyback on what Mary said about the tobacco industry, I'm wondering, I think this bill would be a disincentive for further bad information coming from big energy. They knew about the effects that putting CO2 in the air would have. They hid it. They lied about it. And so if they're made to pay for it, it would be hopefully a way for them to stop spreading propaganda in the future. There's some concern that oil prices would rise because of this, but in fact, people from the Center for Biological Diversity have consulted with economists from the UCs who say that it will not raise gas prices, which are generally set in a global market. So, and lastly, I just want to say, my husband and I are co-owners of a small company, currently does plans and permits, but we used to do construction. It was hard to find laborers because people can't live in Santa Barbara. This bill would pay for some efficiencies in housing. especially for lower income housing that would drive costs down for living in Santa Barbara. So anything that could make this more affordable and help us have our workers live in a place where they actually work would be fantastic. So thank you for considering it.
Eric, can you say your last name,
That's
please?
okay. Bershinger. Thank you. Hi, I'm Eric Bershinger. I am a UCSB graduate, and I volunteer with Seafrog a lot in Ventura County. And I am also not here representing them today, but I also have a part-time job at Santa Barbara County Fire Safe Council. So I work in a lot of I work in wildfire resiliency, basically. I'm working on their program right now for the home hardening program, where I help homeowners receive rebate checks to harden their homes to prepare for wildfires. And what I like about this program is that the money for it does not come from California taxpayers. It comes from a utility company that was legally required to pay out a settlement because of a wildfire that they started, because of the Thomas Fire, basically. And the Thomas Fire is kind of a full circle moment in that the Thomas Fire is what got me involved in climate work to begin with. In 2017, I was in high school, and I looked over to the hillside and everything's on fire, and it just ignited something in me. Excuse the pun. And I decided to devote my career to helping people in climate resiliency and wildfire resiliency, and making sure that as few people have to go through this as possible. So I think if utility companies can clean up for the messes they made without a big fuss, then why can't oil companies as well? And oil companies have caused probably far more damage than any utility company has. I would say this would benefit Santa Barbara County, especially. There's 3 different SB 535 disadvantaged communities that money could specifically go towards, but also a lot of the money could just be used for the entire county in general. Actually, when you mentioned the orphan oil wells, I was frantically texting one of my organizers from Seafrog because she does a lot of meetings with the leaders of behind the legislation and a lot of the campaign organizers, and she thinks that it most likely will be able to use or go towards plugging of orphan wells. I think the details will be ironed out once it passes and goes through the House chambers and all that. But it would most likely be able to use for something like that. And also resolutions like this are extremely important right now. I've met with a lot of Central Coast lawmakers. I just met with, actually it was a different thing, but I met with Assemblymember Hart's office, Jackie Irwin's office, Lamon's office as well. And I think the need for resolutions is huge right now because a lot of these lawmakers are kind of not realizing the on the ground benefits that this bill could provide. And as we pass these resolutions through local municipalities, we're seeing that a lot of them these entities need funding for climate work. That is going to get very expensive, only going to get more expensive. And the funding isn't coming in from the federal level as much anymore. And we need the financial need is still there, obviously. So this would be an extremely good way to fill that gap and to make polluters actually contribute to cleaning up the mess that they made. And oil companies would really only pay a tiny fraction of 1% of their profits. And I don't see that impacting prices very much at all on the local level. So yeah, thank you. And yeah.
Okay, then we have one person online. Evelyn, if you could unmute yourself and state your first and last name.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Evelyn Sang, and I am a UCSB student, Go Gauchos, and also a youth leader with Seafrog, along with Eric. I'm here today as a young person about to graduate next June, and I'm also here today as an older sister who is deeply concerned about my generation's future and the future of my siblings and the kids I work with and my own kids I may have one day. I want to kind of re-talk about a possible point of concern on the bill, which is that it may raise costs for residents or consumers, which is not true. The price of oil is set by the global market and not by California's policies or individual companies. The reality is that my generation and everyday Californians are already paying the price. We pay at the pump and we pay in hidden ways through rising healthcare bills, from asthma and heart disease, and higher insurance premiums and the growing costs of living after every wildfire, flood, and drought. We're struggling to pay for basic needs like never before, while corporations with millions in profits shift the burden of climate damages onto us. It's unfair and it's unsustainable. I want to remind everyone about the backdrop of the 1969 oil spill that still shapes the community's identity today. It's birthed Earth Day. We've honed environmental leadership in Santa Barbara, and we have also created one of the best environmental studies program in the country at UCSB. Santa Barbara has always been a leader in demanding accountability from polluters. By passing the resolution, we could continue that legacy and send a clear message that our health and future matter more than fossil fuel profits. The Polluters Pay Superfund is based on a value we all learned as kids. If you make a mess, you clean it up. The bill would ensure that at least some of the record-breaking profits these companies are making are reinvested into our communities, which means more resources for sea level rise, for renewable opportunities, wildfire recovery, etc. These companies have known since the 50s how much harm their products cause, and rather than putting efforts toward mitigating these harms, they've actually spent billions of dollars on misinformation to avoid accountability while continuing to pollute the expense of our health, environment, and our wallets. I feel like our kids shouldn't have to carry the consequences of their choices while they continue to profit. And I thank everyone today for your time.
That's end of public comment. One more. We have a motion on this item.
I move that we bring this forward for a resolution to the board.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We'll move to our last item, item 6, 2026 legislative platform development process and timeline. It's the last item in your packet. Thanks to our public commenters. This last memo is just outlining the timeline that we anticipate following to update our legislative platform for next year. So we will send the platform around for department comments starting today. And at our next LPC meeting on October 6th, we anticipate having a first draft with that feedback incorporated, as well as potentially some edits that we'll do just for the evolution of the platform, things that weren't included before that became an issue this year that we may want to wrap in, and just always trying to improve the readability and accessibility of the platform. So October 6th will be time when the committee can really discuss this. Then we'll have a public comment period, and we'll bring back the final draft to LPC in November, and then take it to the full board.
Sounds good.
There are no further comments or requests for future business items. I think we are. Public comment. Any further public comment?
There was a question. Sorry, I didn't notice it until now. Jordy Scully from Senator Lamone's office said, "I can confirm that these negotiations are still up in the air about inclusion of our bill and Assemblymember Hart's bill."
Okay,
Yes.
good info from the state update related to I don't have the number.
14.
I know what you're talking about.
This is Assemblymember Hart's bill, but
Trailer bill.
yeah. Which, and that bill, the committee has already supported, which is about, the gravity, storage wells. So,
Thank you, Jordy.
all right. If no other public comment and no request for future business, then we're finished for today. Thank you all.
Thanks.